Welcome back to the Twinspires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hanson to look back at a big weekend of racing. We had Fierceness win the Pacific Classic. We'll talk how big a threat he is to top 3-year-old Sovereignty in the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're also going to look at the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint and a few notable contenders who got wins over the weekend. And as always, what else caught our eye from the weekend of racing? But let's start with Fierceness, who turned in a dominant performance in the Pacific Classic, beating runner-up Journalism by 3 1/4 lengths. And with the victory, he punched that ticket to the Breeders' Cup Classic, where he finished second last year. The question is he the biggest threat to Sovereignty in the Classic? James, I'll start with you.
Yes, I think so. Right now, I would have to say yes. I don't trust Sierra Leone or others to, as a horse like Sierra Leone lacks consistency to me. So I look at Fierceness, and last fall, I could just look at it. I mean, he had his adventures early in the season, didn't run at all in the Kentucky Derby. And, people were wondering at that point, if this horse was a legitimate, serious, like year end kind of contender. And he just put everything together. I thought at Saratoga, win the Jim Dandy, and then ran the race of his life in the Travers at 1.25 miles. And from that effort, he went forward off that effort, ran a huge race in the Derby. The Breeders' Cup Classic, excuse me. They went 44-4 and 109 and like 3 in last year's Classic, which if you look at the 40-year history of that race, that's on the wild, wild, fast side. That race usually has a much more moderate, realistic pace. So they went blazing last year. He ran a huge race to hold in there and run second. This year, he'd come off form a little bit in his last 2 starts, didn't get out of the gate well in the Met Mile, had a little bit of trouble on the first turn of the Whitney. But man, oh man, he took a huge step forward off of those efforts and ran the best race I thought in his career so far. Not only that, he overcame adversity, almost veered in, hit the rail at the start. I was talking to Vance off camera. I've seen horses do that, just veer in or out and lose the jockeys many a time. I referenced the Arlington Million in one year in the stretch with Stormin' Home, where he just veered out suddenly and Gary Stevens fell off him. So just for John Velasquez to stay on him, for that horse to take all that kickback, split rivals on the backside, open up and have another gear left in the stretch, I couldn't be more impressive with that effort. He's back at the top of his game. If you look at his effort in the Ali Sheba, he wasn't the same horse in the Whitney as he was earlier this year. And I think he's ran better on Saturday than he has in any of those races. So I look for him to show up on Breeders' Cup Classic with a massive effort from Fierceness.
But then we need to note too that Nisos did not show up in the Pacific Classic because of bruising. And now we're not sure if he's going to still try to go to the Classic. There's the chance to go to the Goodwood in Santa Anita. But Vance, are there any counterpoints here to Fierceness being the top competition for Sovereignty?
Well, as James pointed out, he did overcome adversity, and this was one of the few times he has actually done so. I'm taking a slightly more jaundiced view because in a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic, he isn't going to be able to get away with, I think, what he did in the Pacific Classic over the weekend. When you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, with Nisos being withdrawn, he really only had one horse to beat in the Pacific Classic, and that was Journalism. And I thought it was so savvy of John Velasquez to make that early move, approaching the far turn, try to build up some distance between him and Journalism, because Johnny V knew Fierceness had a huge class advantage over every other horse in the race. So I thought it was a savvy ride. Fierceness showed up, got the jump. Journalism, of course, tackling older horses for the first time. I think he's going to move up considerably second time out in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, a lot of the points James made are very solid towards Fierceness, but I think the Breeders' Cup Classic in general is just going to be a totally different race. We may not see the type of fractions in the Classic that we did last year, but I still think they're going to be very, very fast. I think a horse like Sierra Leone, possibly some other closers, are still going to get a nice setup. And so it's going to be turning out into basically going to turn out into a stamina test. And Fierceness here and in the Travers last year showed he can get 1.25 miles quite easily. But, I still think a horse like Sierra Leone is going to be pretty dangerous in his Breeders' Cup Classic. title defense. Journalism, I think, is going to take a step forward. So I don't discount those two possibly making a being bigger threats against sovereignty than fierceness, but we'll have to see. Sovereignty, to me, I think, is still the horse to beat.
And I'll just add, Forever Young's out there also. He's the other sort of wild card Breeders' Cup Classic contender. He's scheduled to have his prep here at the end of September for the Breeders' Cup.
I actually still think Sierra Leone's a little bit more of a dangerous competitor for sovereignty compared to fierceness here. And I was kind of surprised you noted the inconsistency, James, of Sierra Leone, because fierceness for a long time, that was the knock, that he wasn't consistent, wasn't able to string together wins until he did that at Saratoga with the Jim Dandy and the Travers. Now he has done well racing over in California, but can he string together 2 wins? And in the Breeders' Cup Classic, he didn't finish second to Sierra Leone in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year. And in the Jockey Club Gold Cup on Sunday, Sierra Leone was he was affected by the collision because Irad, came off the horse. Sierra Leone ran into Irad when that happened. And apparently Flavian Pratt thought about pulling up Sierra Leone after that and taking him out of the race, but decided to stay on and ended up still finishing second. So how much can you kind of draw a line through that performance finishing second this past weekend? Because he obviously had a very hindered trip in that scenario. Any thoughts on that, James? Are you like,
Vance, go ahead. What do you think, Vance?
Well, the question was towards you, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say that. No doubt about it. I mean, I thought that was a big part of it last year, was getting that pace scenario. But he's won 2 of his last 8 starts. He was, or 2 of his last 9 starts now. And there's just, as good as he looked in the Whitney, I didn't think he ran back to that effort. Now, granted, how much was Flavian Pratt riding him in the early stages, et cetera, et cetera. But he still had a shot turning for home. He just is a horse that is just so hard to trust for me. It's one thing to have speed and be inconsistent. It's another thing to be a deep closer and be inconsistent. These speed horses, you can get back in form more so, in my opinion, than these deep closers. And I've just seen these horses over the years, whether it was White Barrio in his final prep for the Travers, or Mucho Macho again, and some others. They run the best race of their life in that final prep, and it's a huge effort, and they carry that form forward. You could say the same thing with Fierceness in last year's Travers, even though he was second in the Breeders' Cup. So I think he is back in form and coming off a win, and Sierra Leone's coming in off of a runner-up finish to Antiquarian.
Do you all respect Antiquarian? He seems to be improving. Of course, Todd Pledger is going to potentially have 3 with Fierceness, and Mindframe still could show up in the Classic. So does Antiquarian belong in that mix, or is he a step below his stablemates?
He's still a step below, in my opinion. But Mindframe still has plenty of time. It's important to remember, it's like the beginning of September. Even the Goodwood, that's a Breeders' Cup Classic prep race, or the Awesome Again, or whatever it's called now. I guess it's Goodwood again. So Mindframe can go to the Woodward at Aqueduct.
Mm-hmm.
He can go to Lucas Classic at Churchill Downs. Or he could even ship out to Santa Anita. To me, Mindframe ran in late July, and they just sat on the horse. And the only reason they didn't run him in the Whitney is because Rapoli owns both he and Fierceness. So they didn't do him any favors by not running him like he was his own horse and had to sit in the barn for an extra 4 weeks because Fierceness was running. But he still has a chance to get back on track.
Any closing thoughts on this one before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I don't know if trainer Chad Brown was necessarily disappointed, perhaps, with the second place finish in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Just kind of reading his quotes after the Whitney, I kind of had the impression that they're basically using the Gold Cup kind of as a way to just keep him fit. And not necessarily, I don't think winning the Jockey Club Gold Cup was necessarily their goal. They would have liked to have won it, I think, but it was just a race to keep them fit. There was no other appropriate final prep for him, or else they would have had to have kept him at a mile and an eighth for some future race. I just think this was the Gold Cup this past weekend was kind of a just a way to kind of keep him fit, well spaced prep leading into the Breeders' Cup. So in that respect, I wouldn't hold the loss against him too much.
Let's shorten it up from the Breeders' Cup Classic to the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint and talk about two horses that got wins this weekend. Motorious, who defended his title, actually won for the third straight year the Grade 3 Green Flash at Del Mar. And then you also had AG Bullet, who won the Ladies' Turf Sprint at Kentucky Downs. They finished 2-3 in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint last year, and that photo finish with Starlist. So, Vance, who do you think is the more serious Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint threat?
There's not much between these two horses. As you alluded to in the turf sprint last year, they finished second and third, and they were only separated by a nose. Both horses love the Del Mar turf course. I think from a tactical situation, I would prefer Ag Bullet. She's got the speed to get out of the gate, kind of avoid traffic and trouble. Unlike Motorious, as we saw in the Green Flash over the weekend, kind of broke slow, got interfered with soon after the start, and that kind of affected his ability to get up in time. He just barely missed, but then he was elevated to first via the disqualification. So Motorious is a terrific turf sprinter, loves Del Mar, as I said. But Ag Bullet, I think her early foot is probably the deciding factor for me in choosing between these two horses. I think they're both going to run very well in the Breeders' Cup in November, but I would kind of lead towards Ag Bullet, and I would imagine she'd be a better value on the tote board too.
James, why might Motorious be the bigger threat?
Well, definitely Vance reference. They both have run well on that Del Mar turf, but I think the 5 furlong distance of the turf sprint may be to Motorious's advantage. He's been first or second in all 5 starts at Del Mar. And listen, that was the worst DQ I've ever seen, I thought, in the Green Flash. I mean, I'd love to. No, I wouldn't love. I mean, nobody would like to see these Del Mar stewards working the Derby. They have to take down 6, 7 horses every year. I mean, Motorious has a responsibility to get out of the gate and get a position. And if he breaks slowly, like he did a little bit in that race, and there's no space there, then he runs the risk of getting squeezed just naturally by the flow of the race. Whatever reef runner, he did nothing to him. I mean, that was a terrible DQ. You could DQ a horse in every single race based on that DQ, and maybe multiple horses. I mean, it was atrocious, I thought. Motorious had no trouble after that. I mean, he was in traffic. He got stopped just at traffic. I mean, I don't know if they took a look at anybody blocked him. They could have been taken down as well. But he was still clearly second best. But listen, in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, that race is going to have a hot pace, a full field. I don't necessarily, like 2 years ago, last year, he drew inside. I don't know if that's the best starting position for him, but he's going to have a chance to come flying late and get up. Maybe he can get there this year. Another thing about AG Bullet, last year, Cogburn, the one thing he was looking at as the turf sprint favorite was that no horse had ever prepped at Kentucky Downs and won a Breeders' Cup race. And sorry about that. And he got beat as the big favorite in there. So that's a concern. I mean, until some horse preps for a Breeders' Cup race at Kentucky Downs and wins, that's like an angle that some people will just play against until they see it. But I would think that 5 furlong distance gives Motorious a little bit of an edge in my mind. Like Vance said, both horses are serious win contenders.
I agree with you on the distance. I've always kind of thought that Ag Bullet, AG Bullet, maybe that's the bigger debate, how to say the name. I always thought that she was better with a little bit more ground, maybe 6 furlongs, 6.5 is the sweet spot. And Motorious at least has shown at 5 furlongs consistently in this particular race, does well at the distance and had to really close well with a 100 late pace rating. If you watch the stretch run, which, I mean, go back and watch it since we can't show it, but I mean, that closing kick was impressive considering the adversity he did have to overcome and did that at 5 furlongs. But with AG Bullet, I am just a little concerned. We saw what happened last year. She briefly led, but then was around 6 at the first call, was able to rally, but still I think needed a little bit more ground. So I would give Motorious the edge and maybe can get the job done this time at Del Mar. I'm not sure who would be the top competition in that race at the moment. We don't have Cogburn right now to worry about. So I don't really know who that favorite would be in the race, but I feel like Motorious should have a pretty fair shot, especially with the affinity to Del Mar.
Yeah, I mean, they're both gonna be two of the top contenders. They figure in the betting, and there's another filly as well. I don't know. I'm slipping
She's
my
so
mind.
spicy, right? Is she so spicy
Yes,
potentially
yeah,
going to
maybe,
show up? I mean,
yeah.
I would prefer She's So Spicy, truthfully, if I'm going to take a filly in that race.
Yeah, so I mean, and we've seen Phillies obviously back to back. Phillies have had lots of success in the turf sprint. They can absolutely hold their own against males. I'm not worried about the sex difference. Just a little bit, like I said, the distance and
Hmm.
trying to get that Kentucky Downs factoid erased.
Yeah. Well, it's time for our final points. And James, I'll start with you on your 2-year-old report.
All right. Well, I did the 2-year-old maiden report. First off, I just will mention Tommy Joe looked good winning the spin away. Vance will hit the hopeful, but at Saratoga last week, Oscar's Hope, a son of Twirling Candy, debuted on Monday. We'll see him here, and boy, drew off sharply to win by about 6 lengths. This was his second start. He was bet down to favoritism in his debut and ran second. And came back here and broke his maiden going away. Like I said, he's by Twirling Candy. Twirling Candy's had a bunch of nice winners here of late. He's going to have some runners coming up for the Breeders' Cup. But Oscar's Hope is out of a not this time mare. Not this time just getting started as a broodmare sire. He has no stakes place runners. I think he only has 13 starters as a broodmare sire, but this one could be a good one for him. And Oscar's Hope joins It's Our Time from the Tom Amos barn. Both horses looking to prep for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. At Kentucky Downs, I'll mention Aggressive Lime. Also, Kentucky Downs had a couple of stakes. Johnny Red Storm and Meringue won the male and filly one. But this was the opening race on Thursday. And this is an authentic filly for Brad Cox, number 8 here, Authentic Climb, who went out and dueled for the opening half mile through fast fractions and then drew off at the top of the stretch and eventually wins nicely by 4 lengths. By Authentic. Authentic is a 9% overall first out winner. He's like 4% on turf. He does not throw precocious runners for the most part so far. This filly caught my eye. Her dam was multiple graded stakes turf placed on the turf, and this was a mile race. So I liked Aggressive Lime. She's one to keep an eye on for Brad Cox. And at Del Mar, Bob Baffert sent out, I don't know, his 11th or maybe 15th maiden winner of the meet, 2-year-old maiden races. But Christofferson is the latest one, a $1.15 million son of Nyquist. Debuted going 6 furlongs on Sunday, went off even money, edged away late to win by about a length, and he got a 99 figure. This race was 108 and change. So Christofferson, another 2-year-old for Baffert to keep an eye on moving forward off of this sharp debut maiden win at Del Mar.
I think, was that the top 2-year-old speed figure this weekend?
No, Vance is going to cover that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, Vance, tell us about it.
Well, hopeful stakes at Saratoga Labor Day. Ted Noffey, owned by Spendthrift, trained by Todd Pletcher, looked amazing in this race. Broke on top, leaving the chute, was taken back a little bit by Johnny Velasquez, who had him and Todd Pletcher had a tremendous weekend across the country. But as you can see here, he's very physically imposing, looks a little bit bigger than almost everybody else in this field, and just looking very professional for a 2-year-old and relatively inexperienced 2-year-old. This was his second start off a maiden win earlier in the Saratoga season. But look at this horse just pull away, romping home by over 8 lengths. So this is a serious-looking 2-year-old, one of the better hopeful winners I've seen in recent years. Solid time there, 22 and change. They're going to stretch him out for the his next Breeders' Cup prep. That'll be the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland, going a mile and a 16th. I guess long term, I question whether he's going to be a major Kentucky Derby contender. Just looking at his pedigree, his dam won her only stakes going a mile on the grass. His broodmare sire was Old Fashioned, who has not thrown many successful or he hasn't been a very successful broodmare sire, let's put it that way. I think Ted Nafi is probably his most illustrious grandchild to date. So, and Old Fashioned himself was one up to about a mile and a 16th. So, this horse might be more of a 7 furlong to a mile and a 16th type long term, but I wouldn't put it past him stretching out a little bit farther. And he's very exciting to watch. I think he probably deserves to be one of the favorites for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, depending on how he does at Keeneland. But overall, very exciting prospect, eye catching yesterday in the hopeful.
What a weekend for Into Mischief at Saratoga and Todd Pletcher with those Into Mischief, because both Tommy Joe, who won the Spinaway by Open Lens, and Ned Toffee, who won the
Ted Nafi.
Ted Nafi, gosh almighty, I keep saying it wrong. I keep saying it the right name, but the wrong.
I think Todd Pletcher's getting it confused now too.
He's by Into Mischief as well. Into Mischief, 6-time reigning sire. He just had his 3rd Kentucky Derby winner this year with Sovereignty. Just has 2 dynamite prospects at Saratoga with the hopeful and the Spinaway winner.
And John Velasquez, too, had the mounts on. Now you've got me thinking about it. Ned Toffee. You got me wondering what's right.
Nope.
And
Ted Nafi, it's Ted.
And Fierceness. Ned. Okay, yes. Now I'm not going to be able to remember which way to say it.
Just remember Ted is the horse.
Yeah,
Ted is
the horse. Okay. Everyone remember that going forward. Okay, and to close out, I'll talk about Kentucky Downs, European Invaders. They were successful in some major stakes, including Flatten the Curve in the Bowling Green Gold Cup, but also Wimbledon Hawkeye in the Grade 3 Nashville Derby. The latter had a number of horses from the Triple Crown Trail switching to turf in this 1 in 5 16th mile race. And Bluegrass Stakes winner Burnham Square ended up being the runner-up. He was the best of the Triple Crown trail runners who had the surface switch here. But Wimbledon Hawkeye came into this Nashville Derby. He was on a lengthy losing streak and technically never raced on firm turf, but took to it at Kentucky Downs. He's a 3-year-old who picked up Frankie Dettori for his first U.S. start and broke from the far outside, was mid-pack in the early stages, and then turning into the stretch. Frankie asked him to go, and he went, and then Burnham Square is right there trying to get the win. You're going to watch this very close finish, but after the race, Ian Wilkes, trainer of Burnham Square, said he's going to rest Burnham Square for the rest of the year, but prep him for a turf campaign after that very successful first start on the turf. And then Frankie Dettori as well, off to a very good start at the short Kentucky Downs meet, but he actually mentioned after the race he was thinking about quitting. He lost a very, very close, his best friend 2 weeks ago, but stuck with it. He said that's what his friend would want him to do, and he's had a very successful meet so far at Kentucky Downs. And real quickly, another race that happened this weekend at Kentucky Downs. We had a Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint prep race where we saw Bear River once again win at a very big price. And we've talked about some major contenders, Motorious and Ag Bullet in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, but don't sleep on Bear River because he keeps winning at very big prices. So maybe he's one to watch. He seems to be improving as a 4-year-old. He had a course record setting time with a half-length win over Howard Wolowitz in this race. And Keith DeZormo, his trainer, says that he seems to feel like this horse is getting better. James Graham said he seemed like the horse had gotten bigger too since his last run. And he also was an upset winner at Ellis Park in the preview stakes for this race. So maybe if you're looking for a big price in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, at least in your exotics, consider Bear River because he keeps showing up on the turf.
Yeah,
That's my takeaway.
He's going to enter the Breeders' Cup relatively fresh too. Now, we talked about distance concerns earlier with the other 2 horses. I think this horse probably wants a bit more than 5 furlongs. I don't think he's necessarily confirmed for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. I think they'll probably roll the dice since they got the fees paid berth now. But yeah, I'd be a little bit suspect at him cutting back in distance. But overall, your points are valid. He's overperforming right now, and he's doing really, really well. And I think that long taking that long break in the first half of the year is helping him out in the second half of the year.
And I did think Wimbledon Hawkeye, I mean, you can make the argument he may have moved a little bit too soon and dug in real gamely. I thought the top two both ran real well in Burnham Square. I would go to the turf. I just don't think he's going to be, in a top level 3-year-old or performer on dirt, but on turf, man, he could really turn into a really good grade 1 performer, in my opinion, moving forward. So, that couldn't be any more encouraging for his future on grass, running that real big second to horse who had run second to El Cordobes and Field of Gold. Wimbledon Hawkeye had been second to both of those grade 1 stars. So that was a heck of a good runner-up effort, I thought.
We'll have a lot more turf talk next week because all three of us, the Roundtable's hitting the road for Kentucky Downs this weekend. We will have on-site coverage. So check that out on our social channels. And of course, next Tuesday, we'll have more Racing Roundtable. So we'll see you then.